Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too. All right, welcome in. Today, we're going to be talking about honesty. And what in the world does honesty have to do with why you're not seeing the results that you want? And so one of the big things, I try to pride myself on is, just always being truthful, always being, honest, always having integrity, right? I want my word to mean something. And yes, I want my word to mean something to other people, but more importantly, I want it to matter to myself, right? One of my favorite quotes is, if you can keep the promises you make to yourself, your life is going to change, right? You're going to build confidence, you're going to build credibility with yourself. And ultimately, that's how you achieve success, right? You're able to keep those promises. You have a to-do list each day and you get it done. You do what you say you're going to do, right? And that typically starts in the morning. That typically starts right away, right? Most people break that first promise they make with themselves. They hit the snooze button. They say they're going to get up at 6 o'clock. They're up at 6:30. They hit snooze 2 or 3 times. And so you're already starting the day on a bad note, right? Because you're not doing what you say you're going to do. And so the easiest way to start to build confidence, the easiest way to start building credibility with yourself is to keep that first promise you make to yourself. And that starts with the alarm clock. And so one of the things I see with clients a lot of times is there's typically 2 different avenues that somebody takes. Now, I will be fully transparent. Not every client that I've ever worked with has gotten great results. There are clients that I've worked with for 12 weeks. There are clients that I've worked with for 12 months. There are clients that I've worked with for multiple years that have a varying degree of the results that they get. And a lot of times the results, actually I would say all of the time, the results are dependent upon how honest they are with themselves. And so let me give you an example. Now, typically when somebody they say they're doing all the right things and they're not seeing results, right? Well, the simple answer is they're not doing all the right things, right? If they were doing all the right things, they would obviously be getting some form of result. Now, some of this can be unintentional, where maybe they're tracking their calories. They feel like they're eating 2,000 calories a day, but what's actually happening is they forgot about that snack they had over lunch. They grabbed it in between a meeting or something. They forgot to track it. They forgot to write it down. Forgot to take a picture. However, they're tracking, and all of a sudden, maybe there's 400 or 500 calories, and so they do that every single day. And now, they're eating closer to maintenance each day. And they're not getting the results that they want. And that's a simple fix, right? Sometimes we feel like, we're moving around. I moved so much today. I feel like I'm just exhausted and stuff. But if you use something like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, or just use the step counter on your phone or something, and you look at the end of the day and you're only at like 3,000 steps or something, that's another cause, right? You're not moving enough, right? So the energy out is very low. And so those are 2 simple causes. Another one is going to be just not taking ownership, not holding yourself accountable, not doing what needs to be done, and then not being as truthful about it, right? A simple test, I like to do with myself is one I do with my kids, right? If, my son's saying, well, my daughter did this, or my daughter says my sons did this, typically when I'm talking with them, I will ask them, did you do this, or what happened? And if the answer cannot be explained in a yes or no, that gives me a better idea of what's going on, right? It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, what's happening. We can figure that out later. But if he says, I was playing with this toy, my sister took it, I ask my daughter, did you take it? If the answer isn't yes or no, and they start explaining it, then I can safely assume that, it's probably a yes, right? And the same thing goes for, weight loss, right? Are you doing every single thing you can do to lose weight? If you have to explain the answer is no, right? The answer is no. If you know that you're putting in the work every single day, you're tracking your calories, you're eating in a calorie deficit, and you're still not seeing results, then yes, you can say, I am doing absolutely every single thing I can. I'm working with my coach. I'm taking his advice. I'm implementing what I've learned, and I'm still struggling. Then we got to dive deeper, right? But typically, the simplest answer is the one that we're looking for, because then we can decide why it's not working, right? The why isn't as important when you're trying to figure out if what you're doing is actually going to lead you to where you want to go, right? If if somebody asks you like, are you tracking your calories? Well, right there, you already know you're not doing as much as you actually could. And that can be hard. That can be hard because you probably are putting in the work, right? I know you're putting in the work, right? That's why it's so frustrating. That's why it can be so difficult. That's why people give up, because they are putting in the work, but they're most likely not putting in enough work, or they're not putting in the work in the right areas, right? And so if you can make it simpler on yourself, right? Next time you're struggling with something, maybe it's not even has to do with your health, your fitness, your weight loss, any of that. It has to do with business, right? You're trying to get new clients or something. Ask yourself, am I doing every single thing I can to drum up more business? Yes or no? If you can confidently say you're doing every single thing you can do, awesome. Reach out for help. Find a new way to do it, right? If the answer is no, then go back to the basics, right? Do what you need to do. This can be, this is very simple, and obviously there's a lot of nuance here, but this can go for pretty much every single thing in your life, right? If you can't answer it yes or no, you already know the answer, right? If you have to explain the answer, you already know the answer. The problem is you're just not being honest with yourself. And if you're not being honest with yourself, you're always going to struggle, right? So next time you're struggling, maybe you're not seeing any results in the gym. You're not seeing results on the scale. You're not losing any inches on your waist. Are you doing every single thing you can to get the results that you want? If you have to explain the answer, you already know the answer. That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.